welcome to the Biohacking Beauty podcast. My guest today is the amazing Chris Mirabile, who's the CEO of a company that, as anyone who listens to this podcast know, I recommend a lot, which is NOVOS Labs. So Chris, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And as we said off air, I love your company. I love your company because I believe that we can obviously geek out on longevity and health optimization all day, but it all comes back to what a person prioritizes, what they can do in a single day. So please explain a little bit, what is NOVOS Lab? What is your product? I would like people to hear it from your mouth. I think it's going to be a better introduction.
Sure. So I started NOVOS Labs because I had a genuine interest in trying to slow down the process of aging and by extension to reduce the risk for different diseases of aging. Partly because when I was a teenager, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And that was an experience that really evolved my interest in health from one that was more superficial about like working out and staying fit and eating healthy to one that was more biological driven. Like, how can I avoid cancer or DNA mutations or being stuck in a hospital bed contemplating mortality, right?
Yeah.
So over the years, I got involved with biohacking and experimenting with different supplements and different diet plans, different daily routines and lifestyles and so on. But I always had in the back of my mind the question of, is what I'm doing good for me, not only in the short term, but in the long term also? And there's a lot of things that are suggested in the biohacking community that might be really focused more on the short term health benefits, like maybe focusing better or having more energy or more muscle mass or whatever it is that the biohacking goal is, but losing sight for the long-term implications of that approach. And I didn't realize at the time, but I was stumbling upon was this concept called antagonistic pleiotropy, which is the idea that something that is good for you today might actually come back to harm you tomorrow, like sun exposure and ultraviolet rays is good for you today for vitamin D production, nitric oxide production, endorphins. You feel great from it. But in years to come, it increases the chances of melanoma, right? So that's a key example of antagonistic pleiotropy. So I realized eventually that what I was really looking for is what is good for me, both in my short-term health and in my long-term health. And by extension, that evolved into an understanding of longevity medicine and wanting to do things that would be good for me throughout the course of my life and extend my health span and lifespan. So I started attending events in the space, typically PhDs presenting their research. I was the only non-doctor in the crowd. And I came to understand the different hallmarks or mechanisms of aging that was written about in the seminal paper in the journal Cell in, I believe, 2013. And I started to talk to the scientists and network with them and ask them about research related to natural substances that could address these hallmarks of aging, and asked, would this be a good approach to try to address health span and lifespan? And they universally said, yes, that's probably the best approach. That is to address all of the hallmarks simultaneously, or at least as many of them as possible simultaneously. And I was also somewhat surprised to find that the natural ingredients I was researching had a lot of optimism and positivity from these scientists about their potential to impact these hallmarks of aging. At the time, everything that was being done was on the biotech side or on the pharmaceutical side. And there was really nothing I could do as a consumer other than eat healthy, exercise, and get good sleep. Or put together a stack of my own, right? But that's not convenient and feasible for most people. So that's when I decided to start NOVOS. And so to get to your question, we are the first company to address all 10 hallmarks of aging simultaneously in one single formula. That formula is our launch formula called NOVOS Core. We also have a product to add on to that called NOVOS Boost. And just today, in fact, we launched a biological age test kit, which includes the DunedInPACE clock, which is an epigenetic clock to measure your pace of aging. It's arguably the most accurate and precise epigenetic test kit out there. We have a biological age test, which was collaborated on with Harvard scientists. And we have a telomere length test as well, all in one single package that you can buy on our website.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that's why I like you guys, because you are on top of your game.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was one of those people, not necessarily the lectures that you attended, but that's how I kind of developed the idea that came to fruition as Young Goose, as our skincare company. from the same understanding that we really need to balance out our wish for optimal performance right now, but not basically pay for it with health span, with longevity. And sometimes I explain, to someone who really wants to get a feasible understanding, I look at lions, right? We normally have a great respect for the animal kingdom and the lions specifically. And we can look at a lion. It has basically two phases. The first phase is a phase where it kind of bides its time until it is the apex lion of the pack. And then it's the apex lion of the pack. When it's the apex lion, because its main purpose or the only purpose it really has is spreading its seed, it invests all of its resources in order to stay the apex lion. It doesn't care about what happens when he gets dethroned. That is irrelevant for its genetic continuity. It basically burns every reservoir that it has. A lion is an animal that conserves itself and preserves itself because there is no reason for optimal performance. It's kind of preserving its ability to be the apex lion. Obviously, there are things, lion lifestyle, that trigger that, right? It's fasting unwillingly, but because it's not the apex lion, it's fasting. It has less of pride protection. So a lot of the times it needs to run after its own food, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we kind of have those mechanisms as well. So a lot of the times, I agree with you, when people are trying to optimize their performance, it's not really optimal. It's optimal for right now, but not for the long run, which wouldn't be optimal for us. I 100% agree with you.
Right. You bring up a great point, Amate. So this is something that I'm working on right now. I plan to publish on my website, my personal blog sometime soon. So I have a blog called slowmyage.com, which goes over my biological age results and my lifestyle and so on. But one of the things I want to write about is the way I'm visualizing it is as a Venn diagram. If you think of three circles that intercept each other, one of them would be performance, which is what you're talking about. Another would be health, and another would be longevity. And the point of this is that not everything you do for your health in the short term is actually good for your longevity or performance necessarily. Not everything you do for your performance, whether it be physical performance, mental performance, and so on, is good for your health in the short term or for your longevity, right? Take anabolic steroids, great for performance, but not good for your health or longevity, right? So that's kind of exclusive to those two. But there might be something that is good for your performance in the short term and your health in the short term. Let's just say maybe something like growth hormone that might actually be bad for you in the long term for longevity. The question is, where do all three of those intersect? Where does performance, short-term health, and longevity all intersect into one? And that's what we as a company, NOVOS, is really focused on, that sweet spot where you can optimize your performance, your health, and your longevity simultaneously. And the answer isn't always immediately apparent and clear what you need to do. And that's where digging into the research and networking with the scientists and running experiments of your own really start to show you what is best to be able to emphasize or exploit each one of those different aspects of health.
Beautiful. Yeah, 100%. I like the Venn diagram. I might steal it. Going into Core, which is your main supplement, how does it address the hallmarks of aging? Why did you decide on specific forms of molecules there? Could you break it down a little bit?
Sure. So NOVOS Core contains 12 ingredients, and we were very selective about these ingredients. There were dozens of ingredients that we considered. Then we dug through the research. We also worked with our scientific advisory board, which is a 6-member team of scientists from Harvard, MIT, and the Salk Institute, who are longevity-specific scientists. People like Dr. George Church, who invented genome sequencing in 1984. So these are world-class scientists. And together with the research that we did internally, we decided together with them what would be the best ingredients, including which ingredients showed promise, but we ultimately decided to exclude. For example, quercetin, very popular ingredient, especially for the impact it can have on senescent cells. We ultimately decided to eliminate it because fisetin seemed to be more promising in terms of its impact on senescent cells and at the same time safer for healthy cells. In other words, less likely to damage healthy epithelial tissue. whereas quercetin had some risk of doing that. So we first wanted to do no harm and then look at ways that we could maximize the longevity benefits and synergistic effects of different ingredients and by extension, hallmarks or mechanisms of aging on each other. So those 12 ingredients, I'll just quickly list them. One is calcium alpha ketoglutarate. Another is vitamin C, not because it's vitamin C, but because of the synergistic effects that vitamin C is found to have when combined with the calcium alpha ketoglutarate.
Is it L-ascorbic acid? Which type of vitamin C?
Yes, it's ascorbic acid.
Okay.
Glycine, glucosamine in the sulfate form, pterostilbene, fisetin, as I just mentioned, microdosed lithium, ginger, or specifically gingerols from ginger, malate in the form of magnesium malate. So you're getting the benefit of both, but it was primarily the malate, and magnesium was just a nice bonus that came with that ingredient. Hyaluronic acid at the right molecular weight to be able to take advantage of acetylglucosamine, which is a molecule within the hyaluronic acid. While also not being too small, which could cause inflammation in the digestive tract. L-theanine, rhodiola, and then in NOVOS Boost, as I mentioned earlier, there's one powerful ingredient which many people are familiar with, which is NMN, or nicotinamide mononucleotide.
Can I guess the reason that you have the Boost separate from the
Sure.
from Core is because NMN tastes terrible?
That's a fair consideration. It's a fair guess. No, actually, the reason we ultimately decided to decouple them was first and foremost because the cost of NMN was extremely high per kilogram, thousands of dollars per kilogram. And so including it in NOVOS Core would have made Core more than $100 per month. And that's inaccessible for too many people. We wanted to keep our price point below $100 so that more people could use it. And by decoupling it, it also gives people who have an even smaller budget, who might only be able to afford $30 or $40 a month, to maybe start with NOVOS Boost before really jumping in headfirst with something as powerful as NOVOS Core. So in this case, you kind of have three different pricing options: either Boost on its own for the least amount of money, Core on its own for a moderate amount of money, or Core and Boost, which is the ultimate stack, which would run you about $120 or so a month, $110 actually.
Which is, I'm telling you, I think my supplement budget is around $400 or $500 a month. So, I mean, it's definitely as an all-in-one or all-in-two package. It's a steal. Again, I know it is on your website, but for people who want to get some information out of this podcast specifically, I would love to run over the hallmarks of aging and how the ingredients tackle them per se. So as you mentioned, there are 10 hallmarks of aging, there are 12 ingredients. What's the interaction between them?
Sure. So let me talk through some of these hallmarks of aging. First is mitochondrial dysfunction. So everyone knows about mitochondria. These are, people like to say, the power plants of our cells. They become dysfunctional. The mitochondria is where the majority of oxidative molecules are coming from, because that's where the cellular respiration is taking place. The metabolism is taking place within the mitochondria. And it's also where hormesis takes place, right? So like the hormetic stressors on our cells and the ability to come back stronger, so to speak, it is largely modulated through the mitochondria, more so than practically any other aspect of the cell. And so the ingredients that we have that positively impact the mitochondria are malate, glycine, the calcium alpha ketoglutarate, fisetin, glucosamine, vitamin C, and the pterostilbene. So of all of the hallmarks of aging, I would say this is the one that the most ingredients of all have some form of favorable impact, this one specifically. The second one would be cellular senescence. So cellular senescence is the idea of a cell turning into like a zombie-like state. So this can happen from DNA damage, or when telomeres get too short and so the cell can't replicate properly, or a cell turning cancerous. To prevent that cancer from spreading, one of the mechanisms or tools that the body has is to turn the cell senescent. The problem with senescent cells is, unlike in the process of autophagy, when the immune system is able to clear out dead or old cells, senescent cells kind of fly underneath the radar and they exist still within the body. And these senescent cells release what's called a SASP, or senescent associated secretory phenotype. Long story short, that essentially means that they release inflammatory molecules that can cause local neighboring cells to also get damaged and then also turn senescent. So it is something that when you look at the number of senescent cells in somebody who is aging, it becomes exponential.
Yeah.
And so ideally, you're preventing cells from becoming senescent in the first place. And then if they do become senescent, you're preventing them from being able to spread essentially or cause damage to other nearby cells. And there are ways to do this, like, for example, protecting the telomeres, reducing DNA damage, or having a senolytic or senostatic property on the senescent cells. Senolytic meaning destroying the senescent cell, or senostatic meaning basically keeping the senescent cell at bay and preventing it from spreading. And so we'll get to those other hallmarks of aging in a few minutes, like the DNA damage and telomeres. But the main ingredient that we have to address senescent cells is fisetin. On the topic of cellular senescence, we ran an in vitro study at an academic lab at University of Newcastle in the United Kingdom. And we were able to show that NOVOS as a whole, as a formula, has a senostatic property. So we were able to shrink the size of senescent cells and prevent them from propagating or spreading and causing more cells to turn senescent. And the results were almost the same degree as the prescription drug, the gold standard, rapamycin. So it was in the same neighborhood in terms of the amount of senostatic effect that we had and the size of the senescent cells shrinking by about 50%.
And as you said, it's obviously it do no harm, which rapamycin is definitely not a member of that family.
Right. Yeah. Rapamycin is something that there's still a lot to be learned about it and the potential of both good and side effects, bad, that might come from it. So NOVOS, I would say, is a safer formula. All of the ingredients that we use have been either found in human biology or we have consumed them, like lithium, for example, for millennia without any significant side effects, at least at the dosages, of course, that we're using.
Yeah.
So we'll get to lithium at some point. So the third hallmark is loss of proteostasis. So over time, more and more proteins start to accumulate inside and surrounding cells. And then this interferes with their proper functioning. It's almost like you put the garbage out on the street corner or in front of your home, and the garbage truck doesn't come. And eventually it starts to build up, and then you can't access your driveway. You can't get into your house, right? And that's essentially what proteostasis is, or a loss of proteostasis is. So ingredients that address that include the lithium, the glycine, the glucosamine sulfate, and the fisetin. The fourth hallmark of aging is altered intercellular communication. So cells communicate with each other. That's how they're able to function. And as we get older, they are increasingly exposed to a hostile environment, which includes inflammation, the senescent cells that I mentioned before, stem cells that become dysfunctional, and other substances that can just cause damage to the receptor sites on the cells and prevent them from being able to communicate. And so ginger, or the gingerols within ginger, fisetin and glucosamine, have been shown to favorably impact the intercellular communication. The fifth hallmark is genomic instability. Another way to, or synonym for this, would essentially be DNA damage. As we age, our DNA becomes damaged. And of course, we do have different biological tools to be able to repair damaged DNA. Things like, for example, sirtuins, which David Sinclair has made very popular. But the point is that we need to be able to repair the DNA. And in addition, when there's damage to the DNA, the telomeres can become shorter and dysfunctional, which will be another hallmark that I'll mention in a moment. But ingredients that can favorably impact the genomic instability are pterostilbene, glucosamine sulfate, and magnesium. So to the point about telomere shortening, so as we age, this, I guess, is the sixth hallmark. As we age, the end of our chromosomes, which protect our DNA, which are known as telomeres, they get shorter. It's kind of like the ends of shoelaces. They get shorter and shorter. And so eventually, when they get to a certain point where they're too short, they can't protect DNA any longer. So this is important to note. You can have a wide range of telomere length, but it's only when it gets shorter than a specific length that it then becomes a problem. There was one point where scientists thought that maybe telomere length would be a good proxy for biological age, and ultimately decided no, because there's too wide of a range for a specific age. For example, a 20-year-old and a 50-year-old might have the same telomere length. And that doesn't mean necessarily anything in terms of their health until that telomere length becomes too short. And when it becomes too short, then their risk for diseases like cancer, especially digestive tract cancers, go up at that point. So telomere shortening is addressed by lithium, magnesium, and pterostilbene. The seventh hallmark is epigenetic alterations. So your epigenome is basically the layer that sits on top of your genes and DNA. It turns different genes on and off through the process known as methylation. So methylation typically will turn off a gene, not always, but typically turns off a gene. And so why would the body turn on and off genes? It's based on environmental cues, right? So if you are exposed to ultraviolet radiation, or you're exercising a lot, or you're eating certain types of foods, or you're not eating foods, all of these different things the body needs to react to, and it reacts by turning on different programs, so to speak, by turning on and off different genes. The issue is that age also impacts your epigenome, and certain genes that shouldn't turn on do, and certain genes that should turn on don't. Not only that, your epigenetic expression can determine the way that the cell exhibits itself. So, in other words, the cell can have an identity crisis.
Yeah.
And something that should be a skin cell, maybe it turns into a hair follicle. So cells start to behave incorrectly as we age. And so ultimately, we want our epigenome to behave correctly and to be in as youthful of a state as possible. And so certain ingredients can help. Lithium is really good for it. Microdose lithium specifically. So dosages in the neighborhood of 1 milligram a day, not 100 or 200 milligrams like you might get for psychiatric treatment. So much, much smaller dosages. Glycine, alpha ketoglutarate, vitamin C, ginger, and pterostilbene. Eighth hallmark of aging is deregulated nutrient sensing. So during aging, our cells become less tuned to nutrient signals, which then disrupts its ability to produce energy. So nutrient signals would be things like the carbohydrates and the fat and the protein that you're intaking. The body and the cells should be able to take that information and then behave accordingly. But as you age, your body is less capable of doing that. And that's why cholesterol levels rise. That's essentially related to lipids and fat. Your blood glucose levels rise. That's related to carbohydrates and sugar. And so these things are important to try to keep regulated, because too much LDL cholesterol, for example, could lead to arterial plaques. Too much blood glucose can lead to one of the other hallmarks of aging, which I'll mention, which is cross-linking. So
and
you
even
want
and
to keep.
even yeah, and even protein. I mean, in that sense, even protein, obviously anyone who's gone to a hormone replacement doctor or whatever is going to tell them, oh, you need to eat more protein. Well, as we get older, our body doesn't necessarily know what to do with that protein because of the dysregulated nutrient sensing. Moreover, it will then turn into sugar basically and spike blood sugar levels. So I mean, it's a double-edged sword in that matter, and to your point, important in all three aspects.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. With protein, to your point, gluconeogenesis will
Yeah.
convert the protein into carbohydrates or sugar, essentially. And so, yeah, the cellular machinery kind of goes when it comes to the different macronutrients. And then you have too high levels of these different forms of energy, which then can cause damage to the body. The ninth is stem cell exhaustion. So with age, our stem cells, which are essentially the cells that are able to produce brand new replicas of our cells, they start to become dysfunctional or they die off. And this leads to our tissue, and by extension, our organs, being less replenished, less maintained. And ingredients in Novos that have been shown to have positive effects on stem cells in terms of their upkeep and preventing damage or death would be glycine and alpha ketoglutarate. And then finally, the tenth was not in the seminal paper I mentioned in the journal Cell, but scientists widely agree that this is something that should be added. And so we have added this as a consideration with our formulations and on our Novos website, is cross-linking. So as we grow older, sugar-derived bonds, also known as cross-links, are formed between proteins that make up our tissues, and it makes those tissues much more stiff. So this is something particularly relevant for skin health, where cross-linking can really stiffen up your skin and then lead to wrinkles. And ingredients in Novos that can address that are glycine, L-theanine, and the calcium alpha ketoglutarate. So those are the 10 hallmarks, and also all of our ingredients and how they impact those 10 hallmarks.
Yeah, and this is for anyone who's listened to previous episodes. These are AGEs or advanced glycation end products. So again, I agree with you. It definitely is something that we as a skincare company obviously are obsessed with, make products that tackle that issue specifically. Definitely. So these are the 10 that are targeted with Core. What about Boost? What does it have aside from NMN?
It is only NMN.
Oh yeah, that's what I thought.
So
Oh, great.
Yes, yes. So it's intended to be taken along with core, where there are some synergistic ingredients like pterostilbene, but it is something that can also be taken on its own. So people like Dr. David Sinclair have really popularized the ingredient, though he's not the only one researching it.
Mhm.
There are dozens of labs researching NMN and the impact that NMN can have on NAD plus, and by extension, how that then favorably impacts things like DNA repair to hints of the epigenome, maintaining a healthy metabolism, which would be related to nutrient sensing and the mitochondrial health. And it's also been found anecdotally and in scientific studies to be able to improve muscle strength and performance in the elderly. In animals, NMN has been shown to slow down various aging processes and improve health span. It's not yet conclusively proven it can extend lifespan, but at the least it's improving health span, which for most people that's first and foremost importance, is to live as
Mhm.
healthy as possible for as long as possible, and then ideally to then be able to extend maximal human lifespan. That is more of an ideal that we can all strive for.
Yeah, and we talked about something like telomere length, which can be, very different from person to person. And really, we're not experiencing any problems until they are too short, until they're basically not performing their job. With NMN or NAD, which is what NMN basically fuels in the body or propagates itself in the body as, that's kind of the opposite case, right? We're going to have processes, to your point, like epigenetic function, etc., mitochondrial function, that if we have suboptimal levels of NAD, these processes just are not interested in even functioning and working, and everything starts to accumulate and go wrong. So that's definitely, I agree with you, something that should be obviously addressed, taken, and that we started Young Goose with the premise of supporting it in the skin. So that was a beautiful kind of recap of the supplements. Now, why would you then come out? Why would the next product be genetic testing? Is that because you feel like you covered all your bases as far as supplementation, and now you kind of want to prove your users that they're on the right track? What's the sense behind? Are you just obsessed with longevity and you said, well, this needs to be out? What was the thought process?
Yeah. So, first part of your question, we are not done innovating. I don't think we will ever be done innovating on formulations to bring to market. NOVOS Core is a patent pending formulation. We have filed for multiple other patents, and we will have other products coming out in the future. But why did we launch NOVOS Age, as we call it? Well, the analogy I like to give is this: NOVOS Age is the equivalent of a scale and a mirror for someone who's trying to lose weight, for somebody in longevity who's trying to slow their aging, or as we like to say at Novos, to be younger for longer. If
Yeah.
you want to be younger for longer, how do you know what you can't measure? Maybe what you are doing is actually accelerating your aging. Maybe you're taking Novos Core and Boost and that's helping your aging, but at the same time, you're working out excessively, causing excess inflammation. You're disrupting your sleep because you're not eating enough food to account for that excess caloric burn. And overall, you're causing more harm in that aspect of your life. How would you know it, right? You think you're doing great because you're pushing yourself so hard, but you're actually causing, to that point earlier in our conversation about performance, you
Mhm.
actually might be overperforming and causing damage to your body. So the only way to really tell is to measure. And so we wanted to give people the ability to track their progress by not only using NOVOS Core, NOVOS Boost, but also the NOVOS Longevity Lifestyle, things that we write about on our blog, which give insights into diet, into sleep hygiene, and different tools and hacks to improve your sleep, activity levels, and so on. So we're a public benefit corporation. And as part of being a public benefit corporation, one of the things that we do is put out a lot of free information, free knowledge for people, whether they use Novos or not, to be able to benefit from. And so this is one of those ways, is to share that information about what the latest scientific research shows and how it can impact aging. I'll give you a quick example. One of our most recent blog posts is about iron
Mhm.
and how iron can impact aging and the prevalence of cancer, or your likelihood of getting cancer. And this is a topic that is, as far as I've seen, not really covered by people in the health world or mainstream media. But there's a really powerful study that was published that had a very tight, strong, direct correlation for iron levels and the incidence of cancer. And the higher the iron levels, the higher the incidence of cancer. Now, of course, you don't want to go too low with iron because that can cause harm too. Anemia is basically starving your cells of oxygen, which they need. But having excess iron is going to cause damage as well. And this is the type of information we put out there to make people aware of the things to look out for, the diets to follow, what the latest research is showing, and to take what's complex from the laboratory and simplify it for the average person to be able to comprehend, integrate into their lives.
Interesting. I heard this concept in an obscure ozone for dentist
Okay.
conference here in Miami pre-COVID, I don't know, 4 years ago. And I was like, wow, people are, I mean, it's not even discussed at all. I mean, no one knows about it. So kudos. Yeah, so I agree with you that since science is still looking into, we didn't solve aging, right? Afflicts everyone. Definitely, innovation cannot stop when you're interested in public benefit. But I also agree with launching a test to kind of keep people on track, not necessarily only to measure, but also because, again, to your point about that Venn diagram of wellness, of longevity, you're not selling coffee, right? You're not selling a product that I'm going to take and feel good within 15 minutes. Literally, you have a product that, if it works correctly, the bulk of the benefits are when people are taking it for life, no pun intended, but taking it for a very, very long time. So we almost have to create a direct relationship between the product or products that people are consuming, whether they're doing that alone or together with Core and Boost, or if they're trying to supplement their entire supplemental routine with your products. They have to get some kind of ego boost or some kind of pat on the back. There has to be some positive correlation there. Would you agree? For the most part.
I agree. Well, so to that point, when we formulated NOVOS Core, we wanted to make sure we included some ingredients that would have short-term benefits as
Yeah.
well, because for the sake of compliance, to get people to remember to take the product and to consistently take it over the long term, we realized that psychologically humans are not wired for the long term, right? Like in selling insurance I give props to the first insurance salesperson to figure out how to get somebody to invest for 20, 30 years into the future or longer, right? Most people just are not wired that way. So what are those short-term benefits? We focused on one, skin health. So there are ingredients in Novos that improve skin health from the inside out. One, by the hallmarks of aging, and the ones that are especially relevant for for skin health, that would be things like glycation and cross-linking, or inflammation, DNA damage.
Yeah.
Right, right. So that's, first and foremost. But in addition to that, having, yes, the hyaluronic acid within the formulation can hydrate the skin from the inside out. The skin naturally has its own hyaluronic acid, but that declines starting in your 20s and throughout your life. So ingesting it can help the body or your skin to have more of it. The glycine is prime building block for collagen. Glucosamine can also help for skin and collagen production. So skin health is first and foremost. And we did a small study where at the very beginning of Novos, when we were in the R&D phase, where 4 subjects in their 60s given Novos for 6 months. And before taking Novos, we used an indentometer, which is a professional device that even NASA uses on astronauts. It measures skin elasticity. And then after 6 months, we used the device again. And the average improvement was, I believe, 22% increase in skin firmness, a minimum of 12%, and a maximum of, I believe it was over 40%. It's on our website if you want the exact numbers. If you go to the evidence page, novoslabs.com/evidence. Then the other benefits. Another one is an improvement in mood. So a large percentage of our customers, this is actually the number one benefit that we get feedback from customers for, is that their mood improves. So that is oftentimes just feeling more calm, more centered. And that's probably the microdose of lithium, the magnesium. More than 60% of people are deficient in magnesium, and the L-theanine. All of those can help to bring you to a more centered, balanced state and feel more calm, which extends into another benefit, the third benefit, which is improvement in sleep and by extension, improvement in energy. So all of those ingredients I just mentioned that can help with anxiety and your mood those ingredients combined with glycine can all have a favorable impact on your sleep. So
Yeah.
when you sleep better, you wake up feeling more energized. You also age better when you're sleeping better in terms of reduction in risk for things like Alzheimer's and dementia and cardiovascular disease have been recently proven. The prevalence of them increase when you don't get adequate sleep. So again, those are other ways where the formula synergistically works for short-term and long-term benefit.
Very interesting. So, to your point with calmness, sleep, mood, but also a lot of people nowadays are trying to time their supplement, trying to make sure that they're taking them at the right times of day or optimal times of day in order for the body to use them. We can give an example of two different types of magnesium, for example, which one would get you more calm and sleepy, another one would be for muscles. Taking something like glycine or proteins in general, kind of maybe a little bit separately from a huge meal with a lot of protein. So there's no some kind of overconsumption of protein, which then would not be absorbed well. Is there a good time that you found that NOVOS Core specifically, or also Boost, should be taken for like optimal benefits?
Yeah, I would say the best time to take NOVOS Boost, and this is what I do myself, is first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You can take it on an empty stomach. That's fine. I take it along with a B complex vitamin and NOVOS Core. I take with my first meal, which I do intermittent fasting and or time restricted feeding technically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have my first meal at about 12 or 1 p.m.
Yeah.
and my last meal around 7 to 8 p.m. So I have a half a sachet of NOVOS Core with my first meal. And I typically have a midday snack around 3 or 4 because, especially if I exercise in the morning, that first meal isn't enough to carry me until dinner. So I'll have a midday snack and I'll typically have the second half of the sachet at that point. So spreading it out will likely improve the benefits slightly. Now, it's not something that's required. Like we don't put it on the packaging to spread it out. We want people to be compliant and most people would not spread it out. So it's okay to take it all at once. But if you're taking it all at once, ideally have it with a meal for two reasons. One is that there are some ingredients like fisetin, for example, that are more fat soluble than water soluble. So having some fat in your meal will help it to be absorbed better. The second reason is that the food will slow down the absorption somewhat. To my earlier point, that slower absorption, you'll end up absorbing more of it.
Yeah.
The third reason is that it can also just be easier on the stomach. A very, very small minority of customers, maybe 2% or so, have a little bit of stomach discomfort when they take it on an empty stomach. And about 90% of them resolve that by having it with a meal or splitting it up into 2 meals.
Interesting. Yeah, so the boost, you're just taking it on an empty stomach because you want to just get it as soon as you can. What's the logic behind that?
Yeah, first thing in the morning. So there was a recent study. I can't recall all of the details of it. Admittedly, I only looked at the abstract, but it found that there could actually be some potentially negative effects of having NMN at night, like before bedtime.
Yeah.
And there are studies that show all of the benefits that come from taking it in the morning or daytime. Even David Sinclair talks about how he takes larger doses of NMN while traveling. He finds that having it first thing in the morning helps to reset a circadian rhythm. So that's the reason to take it in the morning. It's also something that can be energizing, like on a cellular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on the dosage. If you take 250 milligrams, which is one dose of NOVOS Boost, that is the dosage that's found in studies to have favorable effects on health markers and muscle and so on. But in terms of to be able to feel a perceptible level of energy improvement, for most people, that might be more like 500 milligrams up to a full gram, like David Sinclair takes.
Yeah.
You don't need to take that much, right? It's like the 80-20 rule. Like you probably get 80% of the benefits by taking only 250 milligrams. But if you want to go above and beyond, you could have additional pills, especially while traveling. But again, doing it in the morning seems to be the best time to get that energy boost. It wouldn't really make sense to do that at nighttime when you should be winding down to go to sleep.
Yeah, another reason. So I agree with you. I take a gram a day, take it in the morning. If I do have, normally I don't take pills since we deal with NMN, right? I have
Mhm.
bag of it that I can just scoop out of. But another reason is if I'll be traveling and my question is if I'm traveling and I do have capsules, sometimes just open the capsules up and again,
Yep.
use it as a powder. If I do it on an empty stomach, I don't know if it's my thing or I don't know if anyone else does it, but I feel like it's
So
better. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you could do is, again, this is for like the biohackers or those who just want the maximalists want to get the most out of everything, right? You could open up a capsule of NOVOS Boost and put it under your tongue for sublingual absorption. And although there are no studies pointing to it in terms of improving absorption, I did look at the molecular weight of NMN, and it is a weight that should be able to be absorbed sublingually. How much more you absorb, no one knows at this point, as far as I know. But you could do that. And so in that case, especially if budget is an issue, can easily, still take the 250, but do it sublingually. And maybe you are then getting the equivalent of a higher dose without having to spend more money.
And also a gram under your tongue. I'm telling you, it's torture. This thing does not taste good.
Have you ever had ketone esters? Because if you think NMN tastes bad, ketone esters are absolutely repulsive.
Yes. So we have a good friend, Sheila, who's the wife of Dom D'Agostino, doctor.
Of course.
And they have a brand. She has a brand called Audacious ketone esters. And these are the best ketone esters I've ever used. But boy, it's not a tasty, it's not a treat to get them.
Yeah, I've tried the Juvenescence ones. I have them in my refrigerator. I had them once. I put them near my girlfriend's nose, and she almost broke up with me just from the scent. I mean, it's just absurd how they taste and how they smell. I'm willing to ingest anything as long as it's good for my health. I like to say I eat to live. I don't live to eat. But with that said, yeah, for most people, they would never ever go as far as drinking this stuff.
I had the same effect the other day with tripe soup. Tried to have Anastasia eat tripe. That almost ended badly. Anyway, so I agree with you. I think you can do both. I think if someone takes it as a challenge to eat well, there's so much interest. It's almost a hobby of mine to find a way to eat well, eat tasty food, but make it obviously as nutritious as possible. Did you ever try raw liver?
I haven't had raw. I mean, I've eaten plenty of liver, but not raw.
So raw liver tastes better than liver.
Oh.
I'm telling you, if anyone is listening and needed an excuse to try raw liver, the taste is more mild than liver. That's number one. And I use coconut aminos, the Bragg coconut aminos, which are probably the strongest as far as taste coconut aminos that I know of. And together with that, you're basically eating sushi. Internal organ sushi.
Where are you getting the raw liver that you feel comfortable eating?
Since you're in Florida, I'll send you the farm or the person that gets it from the farm that we order it from, and they can deliver it to you. I believe. I think they deliver it to you guys. So, but I'm very comfortable eating it, storing it frozen. Cut it first. It comes frozen. I do a good job cutting it and refreezing it. Just refreezing it once. 4-ounce whatever units, and again, as useful as any other sushi ingredient. You have my word for it. Maybe a little bit harder to chew, but yeah. Right. So before we close, I do have a question. It might be kind of a weird question, but we are trying to address menstrual cycle syncing as much as we can as far as what we put on our skin or in our body. Did you look at that at all? Should someone be using more or less if they're in some phase of their cycle, their menstrual cycle, or is it something that, is not relevant?
I can't personally say honestly that I know much about the menstrual cycle and timing for any of our products. The only thing I'm familiar with is related to fertility and the effects that some of the ingredients can have on fertility. Also, in terms of menopause and delaying menopause seems to have a favorable effect on a woman's biological age, but that's getting more into hormonal therapies. And that's an area that I don't have expertise on, particularly female hormonal therapies.
Okay, because I can tell you that I have two anecdotal evidence of people taking core and reporting a milder menses. So I guess that's a good thing, but that's obviously anecdotal. But yeah, that's a question that I guess will become more apparent as time goes on.
Thanks for sharing that. I'll put some thought into what could be causing that. I know that like some of the ingredients like fisetin can have anti-inflammatory properties, and so there is a lot of inflammation that takes place during that period. No pun intended. But Yeah, I'll have to put some more thought into it and do some research to see if there are specific ingredients that have been
Awesome.
shown to have that favorable effect.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're kind of coming to a close. We're trying to keep this under an hour normally, even though I feel the urge to talk to you all day. But we're trying to keep it under an hour. Chris, just to maybe try and bring things to a close, who should be taking Core? Who should be taking Boost? Um, Obviously, we did talk about budget, but or maybe what would you recommend if someone was to choose only one? And yeah, let's go with that question.
So a related question that's oftentimes asked is it ever too late or too
Mhm.
early to take Novos products? Like, am I too old to take it? Am I too young to take it? And so the answer is no to both of those. So and I'll give you some real examples. So a family member of mine, while we were in the R&D phase, did an epigenetic test, the biological age test, before taking Novos, and then took
Mhm.
Novos Core and Boost both for 6 months. And before taking Novos, he had a biological age that was -1 year from
Mhm.
his chronological year or age, which was in his 70s. And then after taking Core and Boost, after 6 months, it was -10 years.
Wow.
So he had a very significant improvement. Now, this is an anecdote. It's an N=1. We're trying to replicate this through more scientific means, but that was a really interesting case in point example. And I personally, I'm in my late 30s. I'm almost 40. I also had biological age tests done, telomere length, all of these things, and my results were also really favorable. So the lab that ran the test for us, True Diagnostic, one of the best labs in the world for epigenetic tests, said that they've never seen results like mine before. And so my telomere age is that of a 7.8-year-old. Which, yeah, exactly. I mean, that clearly telomere
Uh,
age is not the best measure for your biological age. But like I said before, the longer your telomeres, with, of course, exceptions of not too long,
yeah.
the better to avoid certain
Mhm.
types of diseases. My biological age, according to epigenetic tests, across 7 different tests, averaged out to -8.4 years, or 23% slower aging.
Beautiful.
And for some of the more powerful ones, like the principal component analysis, true age clock, it was minus almost 14 years, so 37% slower aging. And then finally, the DunedInPACE clock, which is essentially the most powerful clock out there. It's what we offer through Novos. It was a collaboration between Columbia University and Duke University researchers. It tells you how fast you're aging at this moment in time. Was 31% slower aging, so almost a third slower per year.
Beautiful.
Um, so that's someone in their mid 30s, and then somebody who's younger. A way to look at it is the earlier you get started eating healthy or exercising or living a healthier life, the benefits will accumulate over time. And so if you're in your 20s or late teens even, and you start from an early age and you fast forward to when you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s, you'll be way ahead of your peers in terms of your biological aging, what you look like, your risk for different health impediments, and so on. So, to your question specifically, I would say ideally they're taking Core and Boost. If they can't afford that, ideally Core. If they can't afford that, then Boost. And if they can't afford that, then just follow the information that we share on our website in terms of the Novos longevity diet, which you can find at novoslabs.com/diet, lifestyle advice for sleep, for exercise. I did a webinar that you can find on YouTube. If you search for Novos lifestyle webinar, you'll find it. It's about an hour long with a Q&A session talking about the research around longevity, lifestyle. And to that point, I'll also be doing another webinar soon on ways to track your biological age, everything from proteomics to epigenetics and metabolomics and facial age AI and VO2 max and so on. So many different measures.
Fantastic. Yeah, that we'll have all the links to the website, to the blog, on our podcast description. So if anyone needs a quick link, that's where they're going to find it. As I told Chris off air, I really like their website. So I recommend everyone who's listening to go and check it out. But yeah, Chris, I highly appreciate you coming on the podcast. Um, I'm really glad for the opportunity to match a face to a product that I've been following and recommending for a very long time. And more power to you. You're doing a great thing. You're contributing to the world in an amazing way, in an impressive way. And please continue to do what you're doing.
I really appreciate that, Amate. A vision I have for NOVOS is to eventually achieve adding 1 billion years of life to humanity. So people who would otherwise be passing away prematurely relative to what their potential is, to return those moments for the person to experience and for their family to be with them, their friends and loved ones to be with them. So that's ultimately what this is all about, right? We can geek out about the science behind it and the biohacking and so on, but ultimately it's for us to feel our best, to be here for as long as possible, and to be there with our loved ones.
Yeah, amen. Absolutely. Okay, Chris, thank you very much. And I wish you continued success.
Thank you, Amate.